So joining our series on this episode is Arthur Tzaneros, co-founder and managing director of ACFS Port Logistics. Arthur, I know you're a relatively private person. You don't give a lot of interviews, so it's a pleasure having the opportunity to share your journey. I want to start with your background, if I could. As I understand it, you've got a strong Greek heritage. Walk us through a little bit about your family.
Yeah, thank you. Grandparents immigrated from Greece in the 50s. Actually, my father's mother was actually pregnant to my father on the 90-day journey from Greece to Sydney, and I think they could have been dropped off in Melbourne, and but anyway they landed in Sydney, and the same with my mother's side. So my parents were born here in Australia, and obviously therefore I was. And I'm one of 6 children, so I'm the oldest of 6. Typical large Greek family. You don't see too many of those these days. I've only got 3 children, so failed miserably on that front. So look, they immigrated here. It's a family that prides itself on hard work, and I use an example of my grandfather's. My father's father was, his first job when he came to Australia was to dig up Warragamba Dam with a shovel. You tell someone to do a job like that these days, they'd tell you where to go. But and my mother's father, was had some fish shops and things like that. So none of it was easy work. I think that type of philosophy has gone right through the generations. That hard work will never kill you, and hard work will bring success.
It's a great philosophy to have. I want to ask you about the family's origins in business. I think your father, alongside his brother Steve, started a business called Smith Brothers Transport. Walk us through how they became involved in transportation and then the evolution of that business.
Yeah, look, it goes back a little further than that. Both my father Terry and his brother Steve finished school in year 10. So they didn't finish their schooling up to year 12 like most people do these days, but it didn't hold them back. They were truck drivers. My father started work at 2 o'clock in the morning, delivering potatoes and onions. His father, ran one of those fruit stalls at Flemington markets, and my father would deliver, from 2 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock in the morning, and if that wasn't a big enough day, carrying 20 kilo bags of spuds and onions, he'd then go and deliver containers for the rest of the day and probably finish at about 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then do it all over again the following day. So in the early years, I didn't see a lot of my father, and obviously no regrets, because it's the hard work that made him successful to put me in the position that I'm probably in today.
From there, I read that you were born in Sydney and attended the Scots College in the eastern suburbs. Give us an insight into your first exposure to business and perhaps some of those lessons that you learned from your father and grandfather as well.
Yeah, look, I'll just go back to going to the Scots College because it was a fairly proud moment for my mum and dad. I was one of the first children in our extended family to ever go to a private school. So I went to Scots in year 7. Went to a public school prior to that. Went through my schooling, but my father also had very strong views that I needed to have a strong work ethic. And so from the age of 11, he brought me to work and put me into the workshop, which was the repairing of trucks. And Mark Perry, who was the head engineer at the time and still with us today actually, he's been on the entire journey with my father. My father said to him, Mark, I've got a new apprentice for you. And Mark looked at me, he says, well, how hard do you want me to work him? And Terry at the time said, 2 showers, Mark. And that meant, make sure you work him hard, because 1 shower won't be enough to clean him up. So That started. So I worked every school holidays from 11 years old, all the way through to the time I finished school. So that's not to say we didn't go anywhere. I didn't travel overseas till I was 18. But we had our regular holidays on the Gold Coast and things like that in January. But if we weren't on holidays anywhere as a family, I was at work. And I think that was integral to my upbringing. That created a work ethic. I actually wanted to be there, so I wasn't being dragged to work, and I think it also brought a healthy respect from people within the industry. Doing that, I've unpacked containers, I've driven forklifts, I've driven trucks. I've played in all that space. I've worked in every part of the business. And I did that at a fairly early age. I touched every part of the business at a very early age. So whilst a lot of people, taking a year off after school to travel the world, and I don't begrudge that, and sometimes I actually think I wish I did that as well. I was in the grind, and whilst it may have looked fun being elsewhere, for some. It's a time now that I don't regret, and I sort of thank him for it.
It's a young age, age 11 to be working in the business and getting exposure to your father and other business people. What were some of the lessons that you learned during that time?
Yeah, look, you're surrounded by a whole range of people in this industry, so and a lot of it's life lessons. Some very successful business people. I remember my father partnered me up with a gentleman by the name of Kevin Weemus when I first got into the white collar side of the business. And Kevin was a very, very successful businessman in our sector. He started a company called Flyway, which is UPS today here in Australia. Kevin, even just subtleties of how to write to customers, how to engage with customers. Terry's very good. My father with relationships. He prides himself on relationships. So you learn so many different aspects. I've obviously got an education behind me, but it's the street smarts of business that you learn actually in the job and surrounding yourself. The best assets you have as a young person is your ears. I understand a lot of people like work-life balance and working from home and things like that. But most of what I learned was actually listening. It wasn't listening to a direct conversation. It was a conversation that was maybe happening 2-3 tables away. You don't acknowledge that you're listening, but it's important that you're always listening and listening to those that you respect and who know what they're talking about. So, and you pick up a lot of good things on the way doing that. Then you've got the blue collar aspect. Everyone in this business has a different story. Back in the day, we had a lot of Kiwis, and it was quite interesting back, called the 90s. Most of our truck drivers had a story of being to jail, and they're just looking to redeem themselves in life. Now, that's not so much the story these days, but it shows how the industry evolves and changes and people change. But a lot of these people are such good people. They've got a hard luck story where they got something wrong, and then they're working their way out of it. They've got a family, they've got kids to feed, and they want to be your protector as well. So look, you meet some great people along the way. The thing that I love the most about this industry is the diversification of people. We've got a huge Indian population now coming through the industry as truck drivers. So understanding their culture and what makes them buzz. You've got all sorts of different people coming through different parts of the business.
It's a good point you raise, where every day you're dealing with the white collar workers internally in the business and high finance, but you're also dealing with the blue collar workers and wharfies and unions and truck drivers and all the rest of it. What are the keys to establishing relationships? You said your father was very good at it. How do you ensure that you're able to get on with people from all walks of life?
Look, very simply, just be real. Be honest, be real, be yourself. Don't try and be someone else. I travel a lot within the business, so I travel to the various states, on a weekly basis. The first thing I do, I put my bags down when I go to the office. Before I even go in the office, I just put my bags down. The first thing I do is walk the facilities and just say hello. And it's amazing just on that little walk, and it's not a little walk with some of our sites. It's Brisbane. Sometimes I think I need a golf cart now, but you have conversations. You say hello to someone, you ask them how they're going, and sometimes they'll tell you how they're going, and sometimes they'll tell you something that you need to hear. Sometimes you have to believe 50% of what they tell you, but it's that engagement. I'm not above anybody here, and no one's above me. So it's staying relative with all your people, being consistent, and one thing I pride myself on is being honest. You don't always deliver good news, but be honest. And if you're honest and consistent, and you have good morals and good ethics, people will follow you. They'll follow you. There's no doubt about that. And this business has had some testing times over the years. And when you ask the people to dig deep, because you can never deliver a result on your own. So when you ask your people to dig deep, and we're going to have to work a little bit harder this year or next year, and this is the way we're going forward, it's the people that deliver a result. So staying relative and staying open, having that open door policy where someone can call you or speak to you, I think it's important. It does get harder. We've got 1,500 people within the business these days. I don't pretend to know every single one, but if I come across anybody in an ACFS shirt, I'm definitely walking past and saying hello and engaging with them where I can.
Before we move on, I want to ask you about post-graduation. So you graduated from the Scots College. Walk us through working with Smith Brothers. I think you joined officially the business in 1995, and you held a number of roles prior to starting the firm here today. Give us a sense of what you did after school and how you evolved.
Yeah, so I went to university at UTS post-school doing a business degree. I didn't complete it. I got about 3 years in, and I was doing it at night. So I was working during the day, doing university at night, and sometimes I do wish I finished it, but again, I don't think I also missed out on that much not finishing it. So, trying to balance, that was a long day, because no one cared that you went to university at night. No one cared that you had assignments due and things like that, because you had a real job during the day. So I was going around the particular different sections within the business when I left school. Started in finance, because that's, I guess, most relative to the degree I was doing. But I did that for a year or so, and then really started to focus in the transport division, because the transport division is the largest division within the business at the time. And went from allocating, assistant allocator to the major allocator, and in those days, being a transport allocator was fairly different, because these days you have customer service who take the phones. You have multiple allocators doing different tasks of the process. Back then, and still today, I still think it's the hardest job within our business is allocating trucks, because there's always a truck coming at you requesting its next job or its next task. But we used to answer phones, the two-way radio, and then allocate at the same time. So your customer service, you're giving directions on the two-way, you're allocating a truck driver standing in front of you, some of them grizzling at you as to why is it taking so long. And I think that was the biggest part of my learning, probably at an operational level. And you know, I remember one day I went home and I was so tired, and my mother said to me when I woke up, she goes, "Arthur, I think you're working too hard." And I said, "Why is that?" She goes, "I think you're still allocating trucks in your sleep." So yeah, so it's apparently my hands were moving and I was still talking. So yeah, look, I think that part of the development was really important, because there's nothing in that transport division that I wouldn't know, and that goes even for warehousing. And I profess to be a warehousing expert. I have experts within the business, but there's every aspect of the business that I've touched in those early years. So when you speak to a customer, when you're speaking to the your financiers or whoever you're speaking to, whether it's your advisors, you're speaking with some good authority, and you know what you're talking about. So I think those early years, and the fact that I started so much earlier, I think really helped.
Let's fast forward to 2005, late 2005, where you started ACFS, Port Logistics, alongside your father, Terry. Walk us through the origins of the business. The Smith Brothers business was sold, I think, to P&O in 2001 or thereabouts. How did this business come about, and how's it evolved over the time?
Yeah, look, I'll probably go back to 2001, where Smith Brothers was sold. That was shattering news for me. All I had was vision and dreams of running Smith Brothers, and unfortunately that never occurred. And I had to reassess life. In 2001, my dreams were shattered. And I don't again begrudge my family, my father or his brother, because they did very well out of that transaction, and it's probably back then not an offer that they could refuse. So they did what they did. I stayed on for a few years and worked with P&O as a New South Wales Landside logistics manager, which ended up involving running both the logistics side and also the terminal, having some crossover into the terminals. And that was an enjoyable role, and I learned a hell of a lot during that period, probably more about corporate life and how corporates work. 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. There's always agendas in corporate companies. So look, you learn as to how they operate. You also learn from a private business world what not to do. And I don't say that with any ill feeling. It's just the way they operate in sometimes these corporates do. So it gave me great insight. And in 2003, I probably had enough of that. I was fairly ambitious as a young person. I think 2003, I was about 26 years old. I started up a company called Labour Power Recruitment Services, which today is still going. It's got over 6,000 casuals out on a daily basis. So I don't run that business today, but I was the founder with my partner Luke Webber, and he runs that business these days. But I started that venture in December 2005. Terry approached me and said, "Hey Arthur, you wouldn't believe it. I've had a phone call from P&O." And I said, "Oh, all right, they want to sell us the business back." And he said, "No, better than that." I said, "Well, what could be better than that?" And he said, "Well, they want to sell us Molyneux Point, which is the ACFS head office today, where we're sitting." And he goes, "But there's no business." "Oh, there is a business, but it's not a very good one." I said, "Okay, no dramas." He goes, "Well, if I buy the property, do you want to get back into logistics?" I said, "Oh, of course," because recruitment wasn't really doing it for me. So, that was the conversation. Zero due diligence on this business that was at Molyneux Point. that were taking over here at Port Botany. And Terry acquired the property. It was a fairly good deal because it needed to be done quickly, and we're, as a family, attracted to those sort of good deals. So the deal was, when we started that business, was okay, the facility has warehouses, but we're not going to buy any trucks. And I said to Terry, yep, no problem. We took the business over that was on the facility, and it was losing between $200,000 and $300,000 a month. Like, why did we not do due diligence on this thing? We're so obsessed with the property that we didn't do any due diligence. And about 6 months in, I made a small dent. I probably brought it down to 150, between 150 and 200,000. But I was running out of ways to turn this thing around. I said, this thing's just going to bleed us unless we buy some trucks. And Terry said, we agreed that we weren't going to buy some trucks. I said, I just need 6. And he says, Arthur, 6 always turns into 10, 10 turns into 20, and 20 turns into 100. And he goes, no, I don't think we should do it. I said, well, I'm telling you we need to do it, otherwise I can't turn this thing around. And he goes, all right, go and do whatever you think you need to do. So 6 trucks. Started off in, I think it was about mid 2006. We purchased 6 B doubles at the time, and it was a bit of a big deal. I actually didn't need 6. I probably needed 4, but I wanted that was just to do the cartage back to here. But I went and called in a few favours from some customer friends. I said, listen, I've bought some trucks. I said, I need some work for them. And those customers, DHL was one of those at the time. Yeah, Arthur, of course, we'll support you. What do you need? I said, I just need work for these trucks to make them justifiable. So, look, that was the beginning of our journey in transport, and I think the rest is history. I think, today got close to 350 trucks, 1,200 trailers. So Terry was right, 10 does turn into 20 and 20 does turn into 100. So, but it's been an enjoyable journey.
From 6 trucks to 350, you mentioned there, 1,500 odd personnel and 23, I think, sites around Australia now, logistics sites. What have been the key ingredients in the transformation of the business over the past 2 decades or so?
What I always say to this type of question is we're an infrastructure business that does logistics. So our infrastructure is absolutely key in regards to where it is and how it produces our logistics solutions. So we're on the port in every port. So that's absolutely integral because we use higher productivity vehicles to collect containers, to and from the wharf. What is a higher productivity vehicle? It carries 2 40-foot containers or 4 20-foot containers. And that's a productivity edge. And whilst those higher productivity vehicles can now go off port, in the early days, they're only allowed on the port. So, having that key infrastructure on the port, being able to do what we call high volume stack runs to and from the terminals is what gave us our edge. Since then, we've been developing sites off the port or leasing sites with our developing partners away from the port. But again, every site is not just a site. If the site doesn't connect via a higher productivity vehicle and or rail and or both, we just won't sign that site up. So it's got to play an integral role in our solution. So someone could show us the best warehousing facility and say, look, this is the best warehouse you've ever seen. But it doesn't tick the box for us to provide a logistics solution. So, we've got our own philosophies as to how we run business, but what is key behind it and the driver of most decisions we make is our infrastructure.
What about then in terms of the sites themselves and the expansion of the business? So if I recall correctly, started in 05, expanded to Brisbane in 06, then Melbourne in 07, and as I said, the rest is history. How have you been able to implement that expansion so successfully and so quickly as well?
The journey has definitely changed over time. I think very much in the early days, you hear the saying, fake it till you make it. and we had to fake it a fair amount in the early days. And I don't encourage people to do that a lot. But, you know, one thing we had was very strong relationships from our previous life in Smith Brothers with a lot of major clients. And we won the Big W contract in 2006 with Big W by name Greg Foran, who ran Big W at the time. And, you know, Greg, great man, he left Woolworths Group and went and ran Walmart. And now he's the CEO of Air New Zealand. But he had faith in us as people, and not just in us, Terry, myself, but in the people that we employ. So when we said, hey, we're going to build a new warehouse, but you're going to be our first customer, and we don't have any trucks, but we'll get some trucks, he had to show a leap of faith, and he did so, because Big W was one of the largest contracts in Queensland. And that got us going there in Queensland. And very similar story with Nestle, who got us going into Melbourne. So Nestle put out a contract at the time, and they said, tentatively, you've been awarded this business, but we need to see your sites. And we said, okay, great. Take them to Brisbane, take them to Sydney. We don't have a site in Melbourne. So we went along to Goodman. At the time, we said, we need to, you know, pretend that this site is ours. And they said, oh, what do you want us to say? I said, just don't say anything. Just nod your head when I'm taking Nestle through. You just keep nodding your head. And if all goes well, I said, I guarantee you we'll sign the lease. So they played their part, and you know, we got the Nestle business, and that's how we got into Melbourne. So in those early days, your behaviour, you know, trying to, you know, get those larger contracts, you're sort of doing everything you could. You know, today you wouldn't even consider doing anything like that in the business world that we live in today. So, you know, that journey has gone along. You know, we do focus on the medium to large volume customers. So a medium volume customer is what we would consider to be 250 to 1,000 containers, and a larger customer is, you know, 1,000 plus. And you know, there's customers today that we have that's over 100,000 20-foot equivalent units. I won't mention who they are, but you know, there's getting that the acknowledgement that you can handle the mid to large customers when you're a startup was probably the hardest part of the process, and probably something that I didn't quite appreciate at the time, because you know, I sort of saw it was all these smaller customers that gave us problems in our previous life. So I said, I didn't want to deal with those. Let's focus on the medium to large, and that had its negatives, but today it's proven to have its positives, because it's allowed us to have our focus on who we want to be, what we want to deliver in our logistics solutions.
Came across a quote wherein you said it was never the intention to be an asset-hungry business in mobile assets. Our focus has always been from day one to have strategic property. Walk us through what that looks like from a practical sense. What are the fundamentals that you look for?
Yeah, look, I spoke about it earlier in regards to the property. So we have what we call a zone strategy. You say, what is that? You know, we're on the port in every port, and then we want to have sites that service within 15 kilometres of what we call final mile. So that final mile is 15 kilometres from the customer. So we want to get containers away from the port onto those sites, and then, you know, deliver that, you know, that short distance, avoid the traffic, avoid the tolls, and if we can get it there via rail, you know, that's an important part of our strategy at the moment. So where we can use rail, you know, reduce our carbon footprint, move a large volume of containers, avoid the tolls, and then just have trucks doing those short, sharp shuttles to and from customer. That improves our reliability of service. That's what we're looking for. And you know, we've been very, very focused on that strategy since about 2015. We're very quiet about it in the first 5 years as to what we're doing, and then we became a bit more vocal after we sort of got all our strategic sites. You know, to for another company to replicate what we've got in regards to our strategic facilities would be very hard to replicate today.
I'd like to ask you a little bit further about the company's growth journey. In 2015, the business merged with Patrick in a 50-50 joint venture, but then a year later returned to private ownership. Walk me through that deal, how it occurred, and then why you decided to return back to family ownership.
Yeah, I'll take you through the initial transaction. So we were sitting with our advisors at the time, KPMG, and they said, where to here for your business? I said, well, we just want to continue growing, and we spoke about our competitors, and the competitors at the time were Cube and Patrick, and it was a slip of the tongue, and it wasn't purposeful, but it was more of a remark at the time for myself. And I said to our advisors, I'd love to, if I had the assets that Patrick owned, that business, it'd be amazing. And they said, well, why don't we look at that? We said, well, how do we afford Patrick? We said, well, and that evolved, multiple discussions to the point where they said, well, let's not buy it, let's merge it. You're saying your strength is running the business. They've got the perfect assets around the country from a property and strategic sense. Let's turn those assets into something else. And 50% of that business will be worth more than 100% of your business. And so that's how the journey started. And Terry and myself approached John Mullen, the CEO of Oceano at the time, and John's a good friend of ours still today. John was all for it. We think that's great. It's finally, I think we've got a solution to our problem, because the people that used to run Patrick's were the Digny family, who now run Cube. So the deck chairs, and Cube is actually the former Smith brothers. The deck chairs have all moved, and everyone's gone back into their, moved over one spot. So that evolved, and that transaction occurred, and we went in there with absolutely the best intentions. Terry and myself were fully committed to the joint venture, and we were proud to be part of the Oceano group, and we wanted to make it big. Right, we had some real grand plans. Unfortunately, after the merger occurred, within about 6 months, there was a takeover bid on the parent, Oceano, and whilst it started out as Brookfield, Cube got involved in the bid. And look, I won't bore you with what occurred behind the scenes, but what I can say is that our shareholding could not be sold to a competitor, and that ended up in a legal battle. I think from memory, we spent over $3 million just in about 3 months, just in legal fees, taking this on, and it was a very, very interesting time. It was a period of time that probably could have broke us completely, because we're taking on over $1 trillion in funds legally, anyway, we decided to go ahead and do what we do as a family and take it head on, because we believe we're right. And when we believe that we're right in something, and we stand the moral high ground, we pressed ahead, and we literally put everything on the line. And we're actually warned by certain people, do you understand what you're doing here? You are putting everything on the line. And we did that, and it went to court, and the judge at the time, without going into a lot of detail, pretty much said that the Tzaneros family here have every right to pursue this. And then I think all parties came to what we thought was a reasonable and good deal at the time to acquire back 100% of the business. But more importantly, we acquired all the Patrick facilities as part of that transaction. And that was probably it was probably the riskiest move we'd ever made, but it was also probably the turning point that probably propelled us from where we were to where we are today.
The growth journey certainly took off from there, expanding operations in Fremantle in 2017, Altona in 2020, St Mary's in 21, and then Derrimut in 2022. Just reflecting on, say, the past decade or so, or the past 8 years in particular, the business returns to family ownership, 100% family ownership. How has it evolved since then? Has it grown organically, or has it grown by acquisition, or a bit of both?
No, it's had a bit of both. As a business, we're opportunistic. So acquisitions for us only make sense if they're adding a different vertical, or they're adding something to the business. Like we don't acquire business just for more revenue. We didn't get a lot right in the beginning of the merger with Patrick, and I look back on reflection, and you should always look back and learn from what you did right and what you did wrong. I try and do that fairly, at least on an annual basis, if not quarterly. But we tried to please everybody when we did the Patrick acquisition, and it wasn't working, and I wasn't being true to myself. The business was starting to lose its DNA. And there was a come to Jesus moment where we just weren't delivering, not for ACFS employees, not for Patrick employees, not for the business overall. And I came in one day and said, enough, we're going the ACFS way. And whoever doesn't want to go on the ACFS journey doesn't need to be here. And brought in the entire management team and said, this is our DNA, and this is how we're going to operate moving forward. Anyone that doesn't like it can move on. And there was some interesting battles with some of the staff, whether it was white collar, blue collar. One thing we've always had is strong alignments and support with the unions, because we pay well. We're a good business that promotes union membership, and the union knows that we're fair and reasonable as an organisation. So, we had some very tough conversations with people, I call it the bottom 10%, who were trying to derail what we're trying to do. And we actually turned them into the minority. That group got smaller and smaller and smaller because we dealt with it. And critically and culturally, that was a turning point in our business. So we don't love doing acquisitions. They will happen, and we'll do more of them. But organically is the way we like to go. Our growth is mostly through new customer acquisition. Strategically growing different verticals, share of wallet with the customer. You start out doing transport, then you start doing warehousing. So the easiest win you'll ever have is working with a current customer, because the relationship's there. So, and when they learn to understand what you're about as a business, they'll support you if you're doing the right thing by them.
The ACFS way, which you referred to earlier, it's obviously working. The business is growing double digit year on year, 350 plus customers across Australia. Give us a sense of what that looks like in sort of practice.
Yeah, so our relationships with our customers is absolutely key. There is, I don't hide away as a CEO from any customer. Our number one value in this business is customer. A lot of people say a lot of companies you go to, they say safety is our number one value. Well, I always say it's customer is our number one value, because we don't have to worry about safety with our customers. So that's not to take away from safety, but safety is of the utmost priority in this type of heavy industrial type business. But Our customer is key. Never forget the customer, because if you do forget about the customer, there's someone else knocking on your customer's door, right? So, being in front of the customer, whether it's calling them, seeing them face to face, whether it's getting them out of a bind and not worrying about what it costs to get them out of that bind, get them out of the bind and worry about that later. Because it's those little things that customers care about. And if you treat a customer well, they'll give it back to you in spades. Have we been let down by customers that we've looked after and been loyal to? Yes, we have. But you know who those customers are. But in whole, if you do the right thing by a customer always, as the incumbent, will try and look after you.
But then in terms of efficiency, it's a heavy industrial style of business, machinery and labour intensive and all these sorts of things. How do you, or what are some of the things that you're doing to try and improve that efficiency piece, whether it be from port to customer door through technology? Give us some colour around what that looks like.
The business on a daily basis is very finely run in regards to labour percentages. So, the people in this business know they can have a bad day, just don't have two. So, you can have an off day, but, understand what you did wrong yesterday and fix it, going forward. And if you share that detail with your staff, I use the analogy sometimes if, someone running 100 metres, and most people can run 100 metres, but if you don't tell them how they're performing in that 100 metre race, well, how are they going to perform better today than what they did yesterday? So if you use that analogy across your labour workforce and share the results, and let them know what the expectation is, what is the KPI, and you either didn't meet it or you beat it, and then if you beat it, you reward them, whether it's barbecues, pizzas, and there's got to be some level of transparency. But also what you're doing, you're also educating them, so when they do get promoted, they actually understand how the business works inside, not just on the outside. We do like to promote from within. So you like to reward those that have done the right thing by you. So, it's very important for people to come through the business in that regard. You can't always pass on the cost increases to customers. I think last year's CPI was 6%. Well, I can't tell you any customer that gave a 6% increase. So you've got to find efficiencies, whether it's, again, through the investment of assets. Again, we constantly got higher productivity vehicles on order from our two suppliers, truck supplier Daimler and our trailer supplier in Vaudrey. We just got constant orders coming out of those two suppliers, and keeping up supply with us. Now, if we need the additional fleet, we add the additional fleet. If it's new fleet coming in and we don't need the additional fleet, then we take out the oldest fleet. So we're constantly turning the fleet around. But through the efficiency, it's a mixture of investment in property assets, mobile assets, technology, managing by the numbers. You've got to find ways of sharing the improvements, and customers expect that. They expect you to be better this year than what you were last year, and they expect to share in that being better. And that's what sort of keeps them away from going to tender. So if you can demonstrate to your customer that, hey, the cost increases are X, but we're only passing on Y, because we've had these initiatives that we've implemented for you, that's a good result for everyone. And that's what we're looking to achieve on an ongoing basis. The other thing that we tell our people here at ACFS is we need to focus on why we're different, right? The customers and potential customers know what we do every day, why we're different. And if you tell your customer in a presentation or a potential customer in a presentation why we're different, then it's relative, right? everyone always sits up in their chair. Like, you know, I don't present that much these days, and it's actually something I enjoyed doing the most, was going out to customer presentations and presenting our business. And I probably should do more of it, actually, now that I think about it. But you know, I always used to get up in a presentation and say to the people, you know, you could see that they're tired, they're sitting back on probably the last presentation of the day, they just want to go home. And I'd get up and I'd say, look, I'm not going to bore each and every single one of you and tell you what we do. I'm going to tell you why we're different. All of a sudden, you just see them raised in there. All right, what's this guy going to say? You know, we've got to remain relevant. We've got to remain interesting in what is an otherwise boring industry. And you know, it's not boring for the outsider looking in, because they love their toys here. You know, the reach stackers, the trucks, and things like that. But you know, for us, you know, we've got to make sure that we're at the cutting edge of our industry, and you know, that's something we take a lot of pride in.
You mentioned a little while ago that you undertake reviews every quarter and at the end of each year as to what's worked and what hasn't worked. And as I said, you've also expanded that into the company where you do quarterly reviews looking at the same sorts of things. Where did that idea come from, and what do you look for in those reviews?
Going back in time, you take away a little bit out of everything that you've seen and learnt. And we had a gentleman who was very senior in Star Trek Express, who's one of the most successful companies in our game. And you know, this guy was on the spectrum, and very smart, but you couldn't put him in front of customers. But he taught me a hell of a lot in regards to managing by the numbers. And you know, quarterly reviews is something that we sort of just developed as a business to say, hey, we look at the P&Ls every month as every business does, but the quarterly reviews bring the team together. And what it allows us to do is to collectively put our thoughts together and share what we've seen and or what we need to do to make this business better. So looking back in the rearview mirror is not something we spend a lot of time on, but you have to do. Looking forward is where we spend most of our time. You know, you do make mistakes fairly regularly. So we have a philosophy within this business: make a decision. Whether it's right or wrong, make a decision. You know, if you're 80% there, you know, make the decision. Let's go. If you don't get it right, we're not going to punish you for it. Just learn from it, and don't make it twice. So we encourage mistakes, as bizarre as that may sound, because that's what allows us to be agile and move forward at the pace that we're moving at. And we are a business that moves at pace, and sometimes that's to our detriment, but it's also been a big part of our success.
There's so many great business philosophies that you have. I'm wondering where have you got the ideas for implementing some of these things, and what does the next chapter of the business look like in terms of, like, how are you spending your time at the moment planning forward and not looking in the rearview mirror?
Away from work, I'm actually quite a deep thinker, and I'm probably a person that doesn't rest a lot of the time away from work. I'm a family man. Love my time with the kids, you know, on Saturday sport and, you know, their sporting endeavours as well as their schooling. But a lot of my ideas don't come during the day. You know, I do a lot of reading outside of work and not related to this industry. Just read. And if you read enough, you can make it relative back to your industry. And, you know, you just take something out of this and something out of that. Let's try this and let's try that. So, you know, I'm always looking to advance the business. I spoke about before why we're different. So I'm always looking for ways to try and take the business forward as to why we're different. But we're also very strategic in how we do stuff. I have a very close-knit, trusted group that I share certain information with, and then have them working on certain things as well, because it's not a one-man show here, and far from it. We deliver everything as a team, but a lot of the time it's some of these crazy ideas that I go to bed with and come back the next morning and they said, what is it today? So but it's also, that's the type of thing that keeps it exciting for the team. And as I said, it's these ideas aren't always the right way, but it's got us to where we are today. And so strategically, as I said, we manage the business quarterly. The annual review is a very big review. It's understanding what you did right, what you did wrong, right? Acknowledge your wrongs, because if you ignore them, guess what? They're going to come back next year. So it's really important you acknowledge your wrongs, and it's really important that you're decisive. When you're not decisive around your actions, the wrongs just keep turning up. So and celebrate the wins. That's, and I don't think we do that well enough. And it's something when I look back at last year, which was a fairly flat year comparison to some of the previous years that we've had. We don't celebrate wins enough. So again, in reflection, what can we do better? And celebrating wins, culturally, is going to be key of mind and top of agenda.
How do you build a great culture?
Great question, because it's the question that I'm asking the team at the moment. Is we've got a good culture, but how do we build a great culture? Time is changing. Some people say better culture might mean people working from home 1 or 2 days a week. It's very hard in this business. We're a front-facing business. When everyone was sitting at home during COVID, we were still delivering containers, so people could eat, sleep, and have furniture to sit on. So that doesn't change. So I don't want to get away from who we are and who we want to be, and sometimes that comes at a cost because we don't have that type of balance. If someone needs to go away and do some family time and do things like that, yeah, of course, go do it, right? Just make sure your work's done and do what you need to do. So there's different ways of dealing with that, but we've got to do more in regards to culture to engage the broader group. We're a bigger business. How do we bring the blue together with the white, and vice versa? How do we make sure that the team in Western Australia, who's so far away from a geographical sense, feels as important as the team in Sydney? So look, it's a work in progress. We do all the little things such as barbecues and things like that, but it's not enough. And it's something that I'm fairly passionate about is looking after the employees that do the right thing by us.
Also want to ask you about the logistics and transportation sectors more broadly. Clearly, there's so much economic volatility like any other industry that exists year on year. How have you been able to position ACFS to be profitable year on year, not expanding too quickly, but also not being left behind and not implementing some of the initiatives that you said?
We've had some challenges over the years in getting that right and getting that wrong. But what has been key, and our key learning and takeaway from it, is diversification. Australia, being an island nation, is an island of consumers. So imports, we're an import dominant country of importing containers. And our largest export, would probably surprise a lot of people, are empty containers. It's nothing to be proud of, but it is our largest export, is empty containers. So getting the balance between having imports and trying to get as many exports as possible is absolutely key. But providing an array of services, whether it's transport, warehousing, depot services for quarantine, customs, e-commerce, empty container parks. It's being a diversified business, and it's that that will assist us dealing with peaks and troughs, because not every division is always busy. One thing that's kind of interesting in our industry is when there's geopolitical issues globally, is how customers react and or need to react. So best practice in logistics is just in time. But when there's turbulence globally, it's just in case. So, and we've had to reintroduce just in case as the norm pretty much since COVID. They went back to just in time last year, but there's been factors such as industrial disputes, the Red Sea drama, and a whole range of other issues that have put companies on notice again where they've moved to just in case. It is a fine balance, but we've also got to balance our infrastructure to support our customers. We got caught out during COVID. We built a facility in Brisbane to last us the next 10 years, just before COVID began. And that site just accommodated COVID, right? Let alone the next 10 years. It was literally full 1 year later. It's not so full today, but it's probably running at about 70%. But it's getting that balance right as to what you need long term, what you need for the here and now. And sometimes you set up your strategic assets as a path to getting to the final destination. And not everybody knows our final destination. We don't always share it, but we know exactly the path that we're looking to take to get to where we need to go.
You mentioned industrial disputes there. They obviously have a substantial impact on the operating environment of businesses within this industry. Generally speaking, how do you navigate through the impact of some of these disputes, whether you're a party to them or whether other stakeholders in the business or in the industry are suppliers or a party to them?
Well, internally, we've never lost a day of stoppage through industrial dispute, and that's something we're very proud of. And it not only goes back since the day we started ACFS, but probably goes back further with Terry in his time. So we have a very strong relationship with the union and our delegates internally, and more broadly our workforce. That's not to say that everybody likes us, and it's probably reciprocal. We don't necessarily get on with everyone in our workforce. But having said that, there is a high degree of respect that goes both ways. We respect our employees, and they generally respect us. More broadly, with the union disputes outside of ACFS, we just need to stay out of them. It's not our fight. I think unions in this industry have a place, and people find that bizarre that I would say that. But I think this industry needs standards, because without standards, there'd be deaths every day. There'd be people, driving, killing, citizens on the streets because they're so tired. So, the unions provide for us a level of comfort that they're going to bring the whole industry up to a standard. So we don't ever interject with any union disputes. If DP World are having a drama with the MUA, it's their fight, not our fight. But when the dispute is over, or they stop fighting for 8 hours or 12 hours, we're there to help the terminals, get the volume out, which also helps us and our customers. But, we do react very quickly, and we're able to do that because of the infrastructure and the assets and the people that we've got in the business.
There's also the government infrastructure piece, and you mentioned earlier the importance of rail. You've clearly got a unique perspective on what this looks like. What do you think needs to be done long term across Australia to drive productivity in this regard? You must go overseas and see the sophistication of other ports. Where's Australia at, and what do we need to do long term to catch up?
From a government perspective, they need better. They need to lay the platform outside of the private investment. So, if private investment is building rail intermodals, they need to make sure that rail gets to those intermodals efficiently. So, there's been some heavy investment by the ports and the terminal operators on the ports in recent years. Patrick has just done a heavy investment with NSW Ports for rail transformation projects. But government's role for me is to make sure that there's dual carriageways in, so one lane in, one lane out for trains, which they've undertaken over the last few years in Sydney. But this needs to happen right around the country. Then we need to connect our line haul rail. I don't see a lot of sense in trucks driving up and down the highway with drivers falling asleep at the wheel when rail can undertake the same task. But it needs to be efficient. And I think to some extent rail is not as reliable as trucking, which is why we still have trucks on our highways. So I think the government's got a role to play. They've got the inland rail that they're building, well over budget. But at the end of the day, that's a good start. But there's the east-west, tracks. Some of those tracks get drowned out when there's a heavy storm, and it's a complete closure of the tracks between Sydney and Western Australia and Melbourne and Western Australia.
Before we move on, I want to ask you about supply chains, and no doubt you're always asked about this aspect of business, but there's increased shipping fees and taxes and labour costs that you've got to manage the price escalation of. What can be done, do you think, here at a broader level to drive efficiency of supply chains into Australia?
Regulation, red tape, definitely can improve efficiencies. Just little things that people don't realise, that a truck costs roughly, needs to earn about $2.50 a minute. So every minute of saving that you take out of the supply chain through efficiency, whether it's the new connect the West Connects tunnel increasing its speed from 80 to 90, people think nothing of it, but it's a big efficiency. And when you start talking $2.50 a minute times, a truck will do 4 deliveries a shift over 2 shifts. There's 8 deliveries a day times 350 trucks. These minutes start to add up. So, removing red tape, making sure that we're able to, improve the efficiency of rail, improve the efficiency of higher productivity vehicles, carrying more TEU on a truck rather than just a single truck. But I'm not going to get involved in the broader shipping costs or terminal charges or anything like that. It's dangerous territory for me to talk about. But look, there is a need to constantly have an emphasis on this industry. Up until COVID, a lot of people didn't take a lot of notice of the shipping logistics industry, but they very quickly took notice when they ran out of toilet paper, even though toilet paper is made in Australia. But we're an industry sector that is growing and growing very quickly, and Australia is becoming more and more reliant. What's becoming concerning and troublesome in our industry, and if we don't manage it carefully, is skills. We have an aging workforce. The average age of a truck driver is 51, 52 years old. We've got drivers in their 70s that are still working here, and I can tell you we don't have many drivers in their 20s. So that very clearly tells you that we've got an issue. Yes, we're talking about driverless trucks and autonomous vehicles and all that, but the industry as a whole still requires skill set. That skill set will change over time, but there's no doubt it's something that government needs to worry about and start worrying about it quickly, because it's pushing wages up and very, very quickly as a result of the skills shortage.
been in business now professionally for close to 3 decades. What have been the key learnings to success in business, and then also your success personally as well?
From a personal perspective, I move fairly quickly, and as I said before, sometimes that has its downfalls, but it's also been a big part of my success. It's remain disciplined. If you keep working hard, remain disciplined in what you do, stay consistent as well. It's very important that as a person and as a manager that you are consistent in your behaviour. And that doesn't mean that sometimes you aren't disappointed or angry or anything like that, but be consistent. So that people know what to expect. Someone will come and tell me that we've just damaged this and it's 480,000, and I'll just look at them and I go, okay, and they said, "Are you not angry?" I said, "I'm angry, but," I said, "what are we going to do about it? Right? How are we going to learn from this?" So it's remaining consistent and managing. I guess your temperament is very important in who you are. The learnings. We've made many mistakes along the way, but keep learning from those mistakes. I've never learnt anything getting a decision right. I've learnt plenty getting it wrong. So, it's something that I'm fairly open about.
Working alongside your father, Terry, and your brothers in the business as well, when you reflect all together or when you reflect personally on the journey so far, what are your proudest achievements?
Probably the proudest achievement is the fact that we can work as a family. There's a lot of families that can't do that. My father's my best mate. We laugh together at lunch. We have some crazy times together, and the same goes with my brothers. So, it's a joy working as a family. What my father and myself have been through and what we know and what we want to do and things like that. Maybe a lot of people don't know about, and because we are private. But we're humble. We're proud of what we've achieved, but there's a hell of a lot more that we need to do.
Outside of ACFS, you've obviously invested in a number of companies and ventures through Tzaneros Investments. You're also involved in the Roosters. How do you like to spend your time outside of this business, whether it be on the investment front or whether it be on the leisure front?
From a business perspective, I do like to keep stimulated with different ventures. So, I'm involved in some renewable energy ventures at the moment. I've obviously got the investments in Labour Power, the recruitment business, and Terry, he runs the freight forwarding business, wholesale freight forwarding business on a day to day. So there's lots to keep me active on a business level. But more importantly, I'm very much a family man, and I've got a wife and kids. Still in my first marriage, I need a patient wife to deal with me. I'm far from perfect, and I do travel a lot as well, so it has an impact on the family. So, as much time as I can spend with the family as possible. My passion outside of work and family is the Roosters. Very passionate with the Roosters. Fairly involved with the Roosters as well these days, and hopefully to get further involved. So, a lot of time, and we'd like to holiday as much as we can, and we sort of try and chase the sun and all the snow.
Final question, what does the next chapter look like for the business here? Where do you want to take it over the next decade or two? Yep.
New Zealand is a venture that we've recently started just over a year ago. Has it gone to plan? It's going reasonably okay. Probably hasn't been as fast a start as we would have liked because the New Zealand economy is doing it fairly tough. So, we'll look to establish ourselves in New Zealand, replicate the service offering. So there's a lot to do there in New Zealand. So start out in Auckland, get across to Christchurch, etc., etc. Beyond that, Asia has to be next stop for us. I don't want to say which part of Asia, but I will say that Asia and certain parts of the UAE certainly have an interest for us, and we've been approached multiple times in those parts of the world to replicate what we've got here in Australia. So again, whilst being ambitious, we need to strategically map out what we want to do and how we want to do it, and do it in a way that we know we can support and with the right people, with the right systems, so that we make a success of it.
Arthur Tzaneros, it's been a pleasure having the opportunity to share your journey and success. Thanks for your time.
No, thank you again.